By the early 20th century, British rule over India was embedded in the language of power, the architecture of the cities, and the very narrative of history. Colonial dominance dictated the systems of movement and the visual landscape of the subcontinent. A population divided by hundreds of languages and regional traditions faces a significant barrier to rebellion. Before millions can coordinate a challenge to a global empire, they require a shared identity, a reason to view themselves as a single, cohesive unit. Three significant breakthroughs in solving this identity crisis occurred on the exact same date, May 3rd. Following this date maps three distinct battlefronts: an expansion in cultural expression, mass spiritual mobilization, and a strategic escalation in politics. India's modern foundations emerged from a multi-generational campaign of self-determination, waged across the three specific fronts of art, faith, and political willpower. We start on May 3, 1913, with the theatrical premiere of Dadasaheb Phalke's film Raja Harishchandra. Audiences sat in the dark and watched their own ancient mythology play out in motion. For a population accustomed to foreign art dictating public life, seeing an Indian king's story projected at scale provided a sense of cultural ownership previously absent from public spaces. The subtext of the premiere was equally potent. Phalke demonstrated that Indian creators could commandeer modern industrial machinery to broadcast an indigenous voice. This single release laid the bedrock for a domestic film industry that grew into a shared cultural vocabulary, transcending regional languages and geographic borders. Controlling the cinematic image became a vital act of rebellion. By reclaiming the screen, he ensured the mass media vision of India was drafted by Indian hands. Exactly 10 years later, on May 3, 1923, the frontier of independence shifted from the cinema screen to the spiritual centers of the nation. Attempting to unify the nation's spiritual population faced a severe logistical bottleneck. Essential religious texts were scattered across local dialects and were often far too expensive for an average working-class family to own. A publishing house in Gorakhpur called the Gita Press introduced a solution. They applied heavy industrial manufacturing to ancient scripture. By standardizing translations and running the presses continuously at near-zero profit margins, they stripped away economic barriers to owning a physical copy. The result was immediate. Identical, accurate versions of the Bhagavad Gita flooded the country, placing the core, foundational tenets of Hindu philosophy directly into the hands of ordinary citizens across thousands of square miles. This standardization created a shared vocabulary for millions. By distributing identical texts across regional borders, the press provided the cultural common ground necessary for a fragmented population to see themselves as a single spiritual collective. The final May 3rd milestone arrives in 1939. Global war is looming, and domestic impatience with the colonial administration is increasing. While the nation had built a shared cultural and spiritual foundation, political progress remained slow. Mahatma Gandhi's doctrine of nonviolence had mobilized massive crowds, but the path toward actual sovereignty was defined by patient negotiation. Subhas Chandra Bose, a key leader within the mainstream Indian National Congress, grew increasingly skeptical of this strategy of patience. This ideological tension broke on May 3rd, when Bose formally left the mainstream Congress leadership to establish his own radical faction, the Forward Bloc. His objective was highly pragmatic. Bose immediately began organizing a militant resistance aimed at seizing control by force, while the empire was preoccupied with war in Europe. The fracture confronted the British administration with a dual threat. While Gandhi negotiated, Bose prepared for direct action, ensuring the empire faced an ultimatum with no comfortable middle ground. The traits of the modern Republic of India are traceable to these three specific events. The 1913 cinema premiere developed into a cultural apparatus that currently exports Indian art to every corner of the globe. The 1923 publishing effort established a deep, accessible traditionalism that continues to guide the lives of hundreds of millions. And the 1939 political fracture defined the uncompromising nature of the nation's democratic independence. Removing any single pillar would change the nature of the nation. A culture without political willpower remains subjugated, while politics without shared faith or art lacks a unifying soul. The coincidence of the calendar illustrates how sovereignty is won through the simultaneous mobilization of a nation's art, its spirit, and its refusal to be ruled.